I was late to their baby's first birthday because my chemotherapy session ran over. When I showed up, my daughter-in-law said, "Don't bother. She doesn't know who you are anyway." My son handed me a cupcake and said, "Let's just not do this." I left without saying a word. But I had one thing left they'd never see coming. My name's Helen. I'm 61, and I live alone in Davenport, Iowa. I used to be a second-grade teacher until I took early retirement after my husband, Joe, died 6 years ago. Heart attack. One moment he was fishing at Lake McBride, the next he was gone. Since then, it's just been me. Me, my little house, my garden, and my son David, at least, it used to be. David is my only child. I gave him everything I had. After Joe died, I worked 2 extra years just to keep him in college without debt. I was there for every baseball game, every late-night science fair project, every heartbreak. I didn't date, didn't go on vacations, didn't do much for myself. I poured everything into raising him right. And for a while, I thought I'd done it. Then came Jenna. He brought her home after college. She was polished, like someone who always had a camera pointed at her. Everything about her felt curated. Polite smiles, quick nods, fake laughter. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid. She was nice enough. Maybe a little cold, but she didn't say anything openly rude. It started slowly. They used to come over for Sunday dinner every week. I'd cook his favorite, meatloaf with mashed potatoes, and he'd always bring a bottle of wine. Jenna never really ate much, just picked at her food and commented on the salt. Then the dinner stopped. First it was work stuff. Then, something came up. Eventually, they just stopped responding. He called less. Then stopped picking up at all. The real blow came when I got diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer last spring. It was a shock, but I didn't panic. I've always been the type to take things one step at a time. I started chemo. Lost my hair. Lost weight. Lost a lot of energy. But I kept going. I called David the day I got the diagnosis. I wasn't crying or being dramatic. I just needed him to know. I told him what the doctors said, what the treatment would be like. He said, "That's a lot, Mom. I'll check in, okay?" I didn't hear from him for 2 weeks. I still sent photos from my treatments. I didn't want pity. I just wanted my son to be part of it. I still sent Christmas gifts. Still texted. Half the time he wouldn't answer. And when he did, it was short. Dry. Then his daughter was born. My granddaughter. I was so happy, even though I had to find out through a Facebook post. I wasn't invited to the hospital. Didn't get a single photo sent directly to me. I showed up at their house a few days later with a little pink sweater I knitted. Jenna didn't even open the door. David stepped out, said, "Now's not a good time." That was it. I should have walked away then. But I didn't. I held on, because that baby was a piece of me. A piece of Joe. I told myself they were just stressed. New parents. Tired. Distracted. I kept hoping things would get better. The first birthday party was last month. I got the invite in a group text, no personal message. Just an address, a time, and cupcakes and playtime. I still went. I wasn't feeling great. Chemo had been rough that week. But I wanted to be there. My appointment that morning went long. One of the nurses couldn't get my foreign right, so I was stuck in that chair longer than planned. I texted David as soon as I realized I'd be late. I said, "I'll be a bit late, just finishing up chemo. Be there soon." He didn't answer. I pulled up to their house about 90 minutes after it started. I brought a stack of children's books, a hand-knit blanket, and a tray of mini cupcakes I made the night before. My hands were shaking. I hadn't eaten much, and the anti-nausea meds weren't working. But I showed up. I walked into the backyard and looked around. Kids were running around with juice boxes, music was playing, and parents were chatting under one of those big party tents. I saw Jenna near the patio. She looked straight at me, then turned and whispered something to her sister. They both laughed. I walked up and said hi. She looked me up and down like I'd just crawled out of a sewer and said, "Don't bother. She doesn't know who you are anyway." I stared at her. I couldn't move. I didn't even understand what I was hearing at first. Then David came out of the house. He looked tired. He held out one of the store-bought cupcakes they had stacked on a folding table. He said, "Let's just not do this. That's all. No hug. No, glad you made it. No, sorry the treatment ran late. Just, let's not do this." I took the cupcake, stood there for maybe 5 seconds, then turned and walked out. I didn't say a word. I didn't want to cry in front of them. I didn't want to give them anything. I got home and took down every picture of David. Every school photo. Every family portrait. I packed them into a plastic bin and shoved it under the stairs. But I wasn't finished. They think I'm just some old, sick woman. That I'll disappear quietly. That I've got nothing left. But they don't know what I've been working on. They don't know what I still have in my name. And they sure as hell don't know what I'm about to do next. After that day, I went quiet. I didn't call. Didn't text. I didn't ask for photos. I erased their birthdays from my calendar. It hurt like hell, but I was done begging for scraps of love from people who looked at me like I was a burden. But while they moved on like nothing happened, I got busy. What they didn't know is that I own a piece of land just outside of town, 5 acres Joe and I bought back in the early 90s. Nothing fancy, just a flat plot with a small storage barn on it. We always meant to build a cabin or maybe sell it one day if we needed the money. Well, I never touched it. Just paid the taxes and let it sit there. A few years ago, a developer started buying up land near there. Strip malls, gas stations, a few fast food joints. I got a letter offering $320,000 for my land. I held off. Something told me to wait. 3 months after the birthday party, I got another offer. $550,000. That's when it hit me. I could sell this land and do something that mattered. Something that would leave a mark. Not to punish. No, not exactly. But to remind them. To remind him that I was the reason he had anything. I gave him everything. And now I was going to make sure my name would never be forgotten, even if he wanted to erase me. I called my lawyer, Steve. Old friend from church. I told him I wanted to set up a trust. A very specific one. I want to set aside this money for my granddaughter, I said. Not David. Not Jenna. Only the child. And I want strict rules. She doesn't get it unless she turns 25 and graduates college. If either parent tries to interfere, they're cut out completely. Steve blinked a few times, then said, "You sure about this?" "Dead sure," I said. And put in writing that under no condition is her mother allowed to access a single cent. I want it ironclad. We spent 2 weeks drafting it. When it was finished, I signed everything. I sold the land. Walked out of the title office with a check that had more zeros than I'd ever seen. And then I sent David a letter. Not a text. Not an email. A printed, signed letter. Certified mail. I knew they'd have to sign for it. It said, "David, you made it clear I'm no longer welcome in your life. I understand now. You chose her. You made your decision. I won't be showing up anymore. No more gifts. No more holidays. No more hoping you'll remember who raised you. But know this, I have created a trust in your daughter's name. One that you cannot touch. One that will help her when she's old enough to think for herself. This is my final gift to the next generation, since the current one has no use for me. Helen, he didn't respond. Not for a long time. I didn't expect him to. But about 3 weeks later, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. It was David. Alone. He looked thinner. Tired. He stood there holding the letter. He didn't knock. Just stood there. I opened the door. You really did this? He asked. I did, I said. Why? His voice cracked. I stared him dead in the eye. Because one day, that little girl will grow up. And she'll ask why I wasn't around. I want her to have something from me besides silence. He didn't say anything. Just stood there. His lip trembled like he wanted to say more. But then he just turned and walked away. I haven't seen him since. But now Jenna is blowing up my phone. Texts, voicemails, even emails. All of them angry. You're poisoning her against us. You don't get to manipulate her future. She's our child, not yours. I haven't answered any of them. Because it's not about them anymore. It's about making sure that girl knows she wasn't born into a family of cowards. That someone still believed in her future. But that's not all I've done. They think that trust fund was my final card. They don't know what else I've got planned. They don't know the secret I've been holding on to for nearly 30 years. The one that's about to change everything. After I set up the trust, I thought I was finished. I thought that would be the last line in the story between me and David. But there was still something I hadn't told anyone. Not even Joe, when he was alive. Not even David. Back in 1994, when David was a toddler, Joe and I hit a rough patch. Financially, emotionally, it was all shaky. Joe was struggling at work, and I had picked up extra hours just to keep the lights on. During that time, I made a decision I've never spoken of until now. My sister, Lila, lived in Kansas City. She and her husband couldn't have children. They were trying everything. I visited one weekend with David and stayed longer than planned. Joe thought it was just a visit, but I was actually helping them start the process of adopting, through me. They were going to adopt a baby girl who had been left at the hospital. But at the last moment, the mother changed her mind, and the whole thing fell apart. It broke Lila. She never recovered. She and her husband split, and a year later, she passed away from ovarian cancer. What most people don't know is that after that, I couldn't stop thinking about that baby girl. The one that almost became part of our family. She wasn't mine. But I kept checking in with the agency, kept track of her through whatever scraps of info they could give. First names, general updates, where she ended up. She was adopted by a family in Bettendorf. Nice people, it seemed. Regular working class couple. I never interfered. Never made contact. I just watched from a distance. I had no right. But I always wondered what might have been if things had gone differently. And now, after all these years, I did something I never thought I would. I found her. Her name's Megan now. She's 30. She lives in Iowa City, works as a school counselor, and volunteers at a shelter on weekends. No kids, not married. Just steady, kind, and full of life. Everything Jenna is not. I reached out with a handwritten letter. Told her who I was. Told her everything, the truth, raw and plain. That I was the woman who almost brought her into my family, that I had kept my distance out of respect, but never forgot her. I didn't expect her to respond. But she did. 2 weeks later, I got a call. She said she cried reading my letter. Said it was strange, but comforting. Like a missing puzzle piece had just fallen into place. We talked for 2 hours that night. Then we met for lunch. The moment I saw her in person, I felt it, like I'd found the daughter I was never meant to have. We've met up 3 more times since then. We text almost every day. She calls me Helen, not Mom, which is fine. I'm not trying to replace anything. But there's something between us now, something real. I told her about David. About the party. About the trust. And she said something that stopped me cold. Why don't you revise the trust to include me too? At first, I said no. It felt wrong. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I had been chasing after someone who clearly didn't want anything to do with me, while someone else, someone kind and decent, was showing up without being asked. So I called Steve, the lawyer, again. I said I wanted to amend the trust. Half still goes to my granddaughter, under the same conditions. But the other half? It now goes to Megan. No strings attached. If Jenna and David ever find out, and they will, they'll lose their minds. Because the money they thought they were entitled to, the legacy they thought they'd buried me before ever receiving, now goes to someone who actually earned it. And the best part? That's still not all. Because the real storm hasn't hit them yet. They don't know the power of attorney papers I just rewrote. They don't know what I put in my will. And they sure as hell don't know the letter I left for my granddaughter, to be opened on her 18th birthday. That letter? It tells the whole truth. Who I was. What happened. Why I disappeared from her life. And what her parents did to push me away. I'm not gone yet. But I've made sure that even after I'm gone, the truth will live on. And so will my revenge. 3 months after I amended the trust and added Megan to it, my health started to drop fast. The chemo wasn't working anymore. The cancer had spread to my bones. The doctors gave me 6 to 12 months, maybe less. Funny thing is, when you're dying, people suddenly remember you exist. I started getting little check-in texts from David again. Short, awkward messages like, "Hey mom, just thinking of you," or "Hope you're doing okay." Too little. Way too late. Then Jenna called. First time in over a year. I didn't answer. A week later, I got a knock on my door. David again. This time, he had that fake warmth in his eyes I recognized from Jenna. The same kind she wore like a mask. "We were wondering if you'd like to come by the house soon," he said. "You know, see the baby." I asked him, "Why now?" He paused. "Because you're still her grandmother." I smiled. "Was I her grandmother last year when you handed me that cupcake like I was a guest at my own funeral?" He looked down. Didn't speak. I shut the door. I knew what this was about. Word must have gotten around town. People talk. Megan had started introducing me to her friends as her almost mother. She'd posted a photo of us online after she took me out for lunch. We were laughing over pancakes. And in the caption, she'd written, "She chose me when others walked away." I'll never forget that. The post went viral in our area. It wasn't some celebrity story, but it made the local rounds. People knew. Including Jenna's circle. She hated that kind of attention unless it was for herself. Then I got an email from Jenna. "If you care about your family at all, you'll take that girl's name off the trust. You're choosing a stranger over your own granddaughter. We'll contest everything if we have to." That's when I sent back my reply. I left behind a legacy for someone who earned it. The same can't be said for either of you. They tried to threaten legal action. Too late. My lawyer had already filed everything with the state. The trust, the will, the letters, all of it airtight. No loopholes. No back doors. David and Jenna were officially out of my estate. What's more, the house, my home of 38 years, was willed to Megan. Along with all my remaining savings. Over $700,000 by the time everything was counted up. When I passed, 6 months later, the funeral was small. Megan sat in the front row. David and Jenna were in the back, stiff and silent. They looked shocked when the lawyer stood up after the service and handed Megan a folder. That folder had the key to the house. The trust information. And a letter I wrote for her, telling her how proud I was that she became the woman she is today, even though I had no part in it. Jenna stood up and shouted in front of everyone, "This is manipulation. She did this to punish us." Megan didn't even flinch. She turned, looked at Jenna dead in the face, and said, "No. She did this to make sure kindness won." Then she walked out with her head high, and my legacy in her hands. But there was one more thing, one final truth bomb I left behind. When my granddaughter turned 18, she received a sealed envelope from my lawyer. Inside was a letter. I wrote it during my last month alive, hands trembling from the meds, but every word clear as day. It read, "My sweet girl, by now, you've grown into a young woman." I wish I could have seen it. But I hope this letter reaches you with a full heart and an open mind. You probably wondered why I wasn't around. Why your parents never talked about me. The truth is, I loved you with all my heart. I showed up to your first birthday, straight from a chemotherapy session. But when I got there, your mom told me not to bother. Your dad, my son, handed me a cupcake and told me to go. And so I did. Not because I didn't love you, but because I refused to fight for space in a family that didn't want me. Instead, I left behind something for you. A future. A chance to do something beautiful with your life, without strings. When you're older, if you choose, you'll see all the records. I want you to know that even if I wasn't there, I never stopped caring. Never stopped fighting for you in the only way I could. Be kind. Be strong. And never let anyone make you feel small. Love always, Grandma Helen. They say revenge is ugly. Maybe. But I think mine was quiet. Precise. And permanent. I didn't scream. I didn't fight in court. I didn't get nasty. I just wrote the truth, signed the papers, and left behind a story no one could erase. David and Jenna thought I had nothing left. But I had something stronger than anger. I had a plan. And now, they live in a house they don't own, with a daughter who'll one day read that letter and ask them to explain what they did. And that? That's a kind of revenge no yelling could ever match. That's legacy. That's justice. And that's the end of my story.